Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2018 drama, The Public. Now, this is another request from Brock, so I want to give him a special shout out before I continue to share my thoughts on this film. This is a movie that I've had on my radar ever since the trailer first dropped. I just really didn't get around to watching it until very recently. And I can kind of see why. It's a film that I'm glad I watched at least once, but it's not a movie that I would ever really see myself watching again, or really a film that I would want to ultimately add to my collection. It's not because the film is bad, it's just because it's one of those movies where it's just kind of there. And it's disappointing because this is a drama featuring a topic that isn't really discussed a whole lot on film. So I feel that it's a bit of a missed opportunity in that regard. The film is directed by Emilio Estevez, who you might be familiar with. He was Gordon Bombay, Coach Bombay in The Mighty Ducks. He was in Maximum Overdrive. He's been in The Breakfast Club, among other films. He's a relatively well-known actor. He also wrote the film. And his direction is decent. I don't think it's anything particularly amazing or spectacular. It's not anything stupendous. It's not going to make your jaw drop. He is fairly competent when it comes to the use of angles, the use of movement, when it comes to establishing shots or using particular pans or zooms or other cinematic techniques. I wouldn't say he's a master behind the camera, though. I wouldn't really point out his direction as an instance of a actor turned director who is really remarkably talented. I'm just going to be honest, especially not based off of what I saw here. But he's better than other actors turned directors, but he's definitely no Clint Eastwood, that's for sure. But very few are. The script, though, by Emilio, I would say the direction is more consistent in terms of quality than the script. The direction, at least, is consistently solid. It's not spectacular, stupendous, or awe-inspiring visually, but at least it's consistently solid. The script, on the other hand, it has moments where it really is engrossing, where it's thought provoking, and where it's strong, but then it has other moments where it's full of cliches, or it has a lot of characters and a lot of different points that just are thrown in there, but they don't really add up to a whole lot. And it's also a movie where it feels like things just end without any real conclusion to anything, which I think is intentional considering the conflict and considering the political issue that the film is focusing on, because it's something that still to this day does not have a clear conclusion, but it's still a movie, and having your story end in such a way is very unsatisfying. Now, I do like the fact that the setting is in a local public library. That is something that you don't see a lot of when it comes to a setting for a feature film. So it's nice to see that. It's nice to see the library as a focus. It's nice to see the librarians as characters in this story, and it's nice to see them in ways that you normally don't see. Like, they aren't just your typical cliched librarian characters, like the old lady who is in love with books, that kind of stuff. Like, there are more nuances, there are more layers to these librarians that are featured in this film. Shows different ages, different allegiances, different political leanings. There's a lot of different things involving these librarians that really makes these characters feel more real. the same thing happens with the homeless people that are also featured in this film. Because really, this movie is a spotlight on an issue that exists in America today, and one that was just as prevalent back in 2018 as it is now, where in a lot of these cities in America, homeless people don't necessarily always have a place to stay for the night. Even though there are options available, the shelters fill up really quickly. And there are also instances where there aren't enough of them, or they're too far away. So there's a lot of homeless people who wind up having to spend the night on the street because they have no other option. And they have to do so in extreme weather conditions. And this leads to a lot of homeless people dying. Dying of not just starvation or overdoses or some of these other things that people tend to think of off the top of their head, or at least some people do when it comes to the homeless. No, they die of hypothermia. They die of they freeze to death, or they die of being overheated. They die being in the sun for too long. And these are all things that could easily be prevented by the states or the cities, but they seem to not give a shit, or they don't really put a lot of funding into these things. So it just leads to a lot of these homeless people just dying on the streets due to something that is completely 100% avoidable. So that's what leads to the main conflict in the public, which involves a group of homeless people who decide to engage in a stay at the public library during one particularly freezing cold night in the city. So they decide to hole up in the library after hours, and it's a non-violent stay, but because this is America, you have all these media people and all these other folks showing up trying to twist things into making it seem like it's a terrorist attack of some kind. Like it's a serious hostage situation when nobody is really at risk, or nobody's really going to be harmed by any of these homeless people. And so there's a lot of conflict going on with that. The script throws in this extra thing with this investigator, this hostage negotiator guy, and the fact that his son is also homeless, and his son happens to also be in the stay, which I thought was a little trite, or just, like, did you really need to go there? And there's another member of the library who doesn't necessarily want to stay in the library, so she finds a way to get out of there because she's not going to spend the night. But then she finds a way to help in a different way from the outside. And it culminates essentially in the homeless people and the head librarian and some of the other employees getting arrested by the police. Interestingly enough, they get arrested butt naked because I guess it's a way for them to get the police to not attack them with force, apparently. Hey, we're going to walk out and we're going to be butt-ass naked, and, we're showing that we're completely vulnerable and we don't mean any harm. I get the sentiment, but I don't buy for 1 second that cops wouldn't still tackle and take out people in a situation like this that goes on as long as it does without some kind of force. I don't buy it just because they're naked and the cops don't want to get involved with dick and balls like an ass. They've dealt with that before. There's no way that they haven't dealt with that before. So that was a little but maybe it's based on reality. I don't know. I'm never been in that kind of situation. but yeah, it's just one of those things where the the homeless guys and the librarians, they basically sing, they sing a song. um I think it's I'm trying to remember what song it is. It's a pretty popular song. It's just the song, that title is just not coming to me at the moment. Um, so yeah, they try to occupy the library, and then they eventually give themselves up to the police, and they just made a statement. That's all they did, is they made a statement, put things out there that homeless people should be considered more, that the state should consider changing things, enabling them to stay in the library if it's really cold, or come up with some other alternative. But nothing really ever comes from it. There's also this conflict with this guy who's trying to run for mayor or governor, and he's the type of person who's not very open to a lot of these issues. He's very closed-minded, and uh, Emilio Estevez's character actually gets him to spend a little bit of time outside to show him what it's like to be in the same situation that the homeless people are. But it doesn't really go anywhere because his character never changes. His character never has a change of heart. His character never learns anything. So it's like, why was he even there? So there's a lot of stuff with the script where you have these things that are brought up, but they become dead ends because there really isn't anything to bookend these arcs. And that's unfortunate, because the idea behind this story is structurally sound. It's interesting. It's got a good message. It's got a good conflict behind it. I don't think it needed the extra conflict of Alec Baldwin's hostage negotiator guy having his son, who's also homeless, involved in everything, and his son is a total douchebag. I don't think they really needed that. I think things were already dramatic enough with everything that was going on with the sit-in or the Occupy uh, bit of civil disobedience. Definitely didn't need the stuff going on with Christian Slater's district attorney guy who wants to be mayor or senator, because he might as well be a cartoon villain the way that he's written. I like the stuff with Emilio Estevez and this other woman, Angela. There's a bit of a romance between the two, and I like the sense of humor. I think Emilio did a good job injecting some levity into this film when it was really needed, and I think it had a good heart to it. Speaking of the levity, I really love some moments with the homeless people where they bond with one another. Like there's this sequence where they're in the bathroom and they're talking about horror films, and one of them mentions Scanners, and they have this fun little bit of banter about Scanners. So that was a fun moment. But yeah, the script is it's just not as focused as of a story as I feel it really should have been. It's trying to have this big, powerful, strong message about how homeless people and their story matters, and we should do more to help them in these type of scenarios and situations. But it doesn't offer a hopeful ending to anything. It doesn't really offer anything where you're like, okay, all right, they did this Occupy sit-in, but it seemed like it didn't do anything. And I think that's just makes the whole film kind of feel relatively pointless. That's, like I said, it might have been a creative decision by Emilio Estevez, because that's kind of how things are. Like, oh, you know, it's just a small step. Okay, all right, but it's a movie. You can at least elaborate. You can show what potential other steps could be after this point. But that doesn't happen. So it really does feel like something that's just absolutely pointless at the end of the day, because nothing really happens. There's no big resolution to anything, and it just feels like it was just dragging its feet for the entire running time. But it was still worth a watch for the performances by the cast, and for some of those moments that I mentioned that were strong and effective. It just it just isn't as good or as great as it really could have been, because of the fact that it just doesn't really find the right resolution, and it doesn't really have the right focus. That's why I think Emilio Estevez is maybe at this point a little bit better director than he, and definitely actor, than he is a writer. So I think he probably would have benefited from having another voice in the writing room. Um, but there are some really poignant, powerful scenes. I think the use of Grapes of Wrath was really quite special, especially the way that the quotes from that book are used in this movie. But it's just one of those things where you can tell the love is there for not only homeless people, but also for the library and for books. But it's like it doesn't really know which what it wants to focus on. Does it want to focus on the love of the library? Does it want to focus on the love of literature? Or does it want to focus on the love of homeless people? It's like, I think it's trying to do too many things at once. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to focus. The cast, though, is very focused. I mean, Emilio Estevez is excellent as Stuart. It's definitely one of his best dramatic performances. Really liked his performance in this. Really loved his character. Seemed like a really good guy. Even though he had a lot of rough patches in his life, he got a second chance at the library, and you could tell it means a lot to him. And then when you see him getting railroaded because of certain politics or certain stuff involving the workplace, and him just doing his job but getting caught on the wrong end of it, you really do sympathize with him. And you sympathize with him even more when he's involved in this whole situation with the homeless people who are occupying the library, and then the media and other people trying to dig into his past and thinking that he's some kind of bad guy. So you really do connect with him. And I've always liked Emilio Estevez. He's been one of my favorite actors. So it was really nice to see him again. Alec Baldwin, yeah, it's kind of not the best guy in real life. But the character here he played, he was all right. Detective Bill Ramstead, the crisis negotiator, not what I would call one of his best performances. There were a few moments where it seemed like he was kind of sleepwalking through it, but he was still fine. It's not like he was bad or awful. Christian Slater was fine too as Josh Davis. Like, I did want to punch the guy, but there wasn't a lot of depth to his character. I really think they missed out by not having him at least learn something from what happened. He just stayed the same character, the same guy that he was before he was even involved in this whole situation with the Occupy style sit-in at the library. Jena Malone, she was almost unrecognizable as the other librarian, Myra. I liked her. I liked her performance. Liked the not necessarily contentious connection, but I did like the dynamic between her and Emilio Estevez and some of the other characters. Speaking of the dynamic, I really like Taylor Schilling and her chemistry and a lot of her moments with Emilio Estevez. I thought the two of them had just really wonderful chemistry. They really fit together well, to the point where I would have honestly loved to have seen a romantic comedy or a drama that just focused on those two, because they were such a good couple. Michael K. Williams, may he rest in peace. He played the leader of the sit-in. He was magnificent, really quite strong. Definitely one of his best dramatic acting roles in film, for sure, because I thought he was really good in this. Jeffrey Wright was also great. Jeffrey Wright, you might recognize him as Gordon in The Batman. He plays the head librarian, and he also joins the sit-in at one point after being on the outside looking in. Um, really appreciated his acting in this one. Gabriel Union plays the local reporter who's shady and full of herself, and she played that role well. But once again, it's a role that's written as a complete total dead end because there's not a lot that happens to this character where she evolves a whole lot. Seems like there's moments where she could, but it doesn't really do a whole lot with it. Like there's little hints, but nothing really concrete. Jacob Vargas, I also liked him as Ernesto, the head of security. And there's a few other people, actors and actresses, who are a part of the cast. I think some of the people in the cast might have actually legitimately been homeless people or been homeless people at one point, which makes sense. The film also features some decent enough cinematography by Juan Miguel Asprios, and some alright editing by Richard Chu and Yang Hua Hu. It also features a score by Tyler Bates and Joanne Higginbottom. The score, though, is really nothing of note. Definitely would not say the score is anything that special or unique. I want to look it up to see what that song is, because I know they sang a specific song at the end of the movie. And oh, interesting. Well, apparently, ironically, the movie's release occurred when the real Cincinnati Public Library was being taken over by activists who were demanding leadership not to sell one of the downtown buildings. That's really interesting. And apparently it was in development hell. It was in development hell for like 6 years. Bunch of different actors were tagged to appear in the movie at one point, like Aubrey Plaza, Zoe Saldana, and Justin Long. But it just didn't work out that way. Yeah, I guess the film's cast had access to trailers during production, but then a lot of them voluntarily spent their nights in the library instead. I guess it became an act of solidarity to better understand what their characters would have been going through. That's interesting. That's cool. So, yeah, I think it's like I got sunshine on a sunny day or what on a sunny day, on a sunny day, something like that. In terms of the song, I don't know why I don't remember the song. It's a classic song. Like it's an oldie. So yeah, the song is it's the one that goes like, it's gonna be a bright sunshiny day. So it's that song. Yeah, it's definitely an oldie. It's the song they sing in solidarity as they're being arrested naked at the end of the movie. But yeah, it's a movie that, like I said, it's full of missed potential. It talks about how the library itself is the last bastion for democracy in America, but it doesn't really go that deep into why. It's a film that has a smattering of social commentary and ideas, but it just doesn't really go that in depth on a lot of them. And yeah, it's a film that it's just not really that great. Like it's fine, it's serviceable, but it could have been so much more than that. It really could have been, and that's admittedly a little frustrating when you consider the cast and you consider the overall concept and the idea of the film, because it's something that isn't talked about enough and isn't really talked about that much, period. So it's nice to see a spotlight put on issues like this. But I just wish it was in a better movie, because then it would resonate more strongly. But anyway, that's my thoughts on The Public. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.